What did I just witness? This week's episode gave us no time to breathe. I wasn't even able to fully process what was going on at points because it was just non-stop with the invasion. But unfortunately, we did have to say goodbye to a lot of characters, but one in particular who was one of my favorites. The war is here, and it is time to discuss and break down and review Season 3, Episode 7, which I think will go down as one of the greats of Invincible. Full spoilers ahead. We open this episode with a flashback to Season 2's finale where we saw Mark, who thought that he killed Angstrom. But we see that he was barely hanging on to his life before he opened a portal to a dimension where the mysterious doctor technicians who fixed him before are yet again tasked with helping him recover from his smashed-in face. Now, months later, we see the evil Marks from the other dimensions enter into our Mark's world, as Day 1 has begun, where Angstrom tells the other Marks,
"Go! Destroy everything in your path! Make them see Invincible! Make them fear Invincible! Make them hide!"
As the technicians watch from the shadows. Now we cut to present day where we find Mark is still reeling after the events from Powerplex as he tells Eve that he can't help but to blame himself for everything that happened. Now we see them both discussing their complicated relationship with their parents as Invincible Inc. gets a call from the prison that needs Invincible's attention ASAP, reason being that Invincible is the one causing the problem at the prison. As the plan so far is working, as it's making people think that their planet's Invincible is doing all this, with the goal being to destroying and tarnishing the heroic legacy of Invincible. Meanwhile, we see more of the calm before the storm as Rex is helping Ray move into her new place, but they're interrupted by the invasion. As Rex and Ray both suit up, but Rex has her hang back because he wants her to stick to her decision to being retired. Unfortunately, little did she know that she was giving him the kiss of death, and this would be the last time that she would be around Rex. Now back at the prison, our Invincible sees the destruction left by Marcus Sebastian Grayson, aka Mohawk Mark. This Mark clearly loves causing mayhem and chaos and avoids telling Invincible how he got to his Earth. As Mohawk Invincible and Prime Invincible have a meeting of the fists and they begin to fight, as we see each one of them having an upper hand in this fight, but we see our Mark manages to knock out Mohawk Mark by smashing his hands against the side of his jaw. Meanwhile, members of Capes Inc. arrive, and that's Kid, Thor, Bolt, and Knockout, as they see Prime Invincible and they think that he's one of the other variants and they begin to fight him. Now during this, the prisoners are escaping, and one of them happened to be Powerplex, who's pleased to see that the others are finally seeing Invincible for who he believes that he is. As he's about to join a fight, Mohawk Mark awakes, and we get a little fight between them, but it doesn't last long because the evil Mark doesn't hold his punches like our Mark does, as he's able to make light work of Powerplex, and he rejoins the main fight. Now at the Grayson house, Debbie and Oliver and other characters watch the breaking news on the attack. The news makes it public knowledge that it's not our Invincible creating the situation, but it's several lookalikes instead who are destroying things around the world. Now if there's one thing that I really enjoy about Oliver so far, it's the fact that he's always down for that action. Like, he is ready to fight no matter the circumstances, as he wants to help out, but we see Debbie tries to stop him in fear of him losing his life, but she's able to realize the magnitude of the situation. Now, if I were to criticize something early on, and honestly throughout this very epic episode, it's the moments that we didn't see. Perfect example, we cut back to the prison where we find Mohawk Mark is still out, but the last scene had our Invincible getting beat up by the Capes Inc. Now obviously they were eventually able to recognize what was happening, and they stopped fighting our Mark and fought the other one instead, but I would have liked to have seen that fight. Now they do the same thing literally seconds later, as our Mark heads off to go fight some other Invincibles, and he leaves the Capes Inc. with Mohawk to take him in. Now he awakes, and we later see that they weren't able to contain him, but we don't see what happened in that scene. There's other examples throughout this episode where I felt like there were scenes that felt like they were throwing us into the end of the scene, and we didn't get to see what happened. I bet that there may be like a longer version of this episode left on the cutting room floor with more fights and more little details that were probably cut because of budgetary reasons or just because they wanted to fit within their normal runtime. Now at the Pentagon, we see that they're under attack, and we see that both Cecil and Donald took some serious damage, but they were able to survive with the help of the Reaniman that managed to kill one of the evil variants. Their intel has at least 18 variants out there, but the good news is that not all the Invincibles share the same power level, as Cecil sees this as a chance and sets forth a plan to respond. Now that brings us into day 2, where we hear Angstrom laughing at the devastation that he's created so far. We see more of the heroes and members of the Cape Inc. joining the fight, led by Brittany, aka Britt. Now for those wondering, learn this character is voiced by the incredible Jonathan Banks. Shout out to the Breaking Bad back-to-back episodes here with characters from that show. But this character, Britt, is making their debut on the show and is hopefully going to have a bigger role moving forward. But in the comics, I would say Britt is a mixture of Captain America meets Wolverine because of his leadership skills, but also because of his invulnerability and his decelerated aging. Meanwhile, we see little Oliver is getting his opportunity to being a hero as he's saving civilians in need. Now, unfortunately, he still has a lot of learning to do as Oliver thinks that he sees Mark fly in the sky, but as he catches up to him, he finds out that it's not his Mark, but instead it's Spider Mark. Now, we see Mark and Eve are flying in the sky, trying to figure out where to go next, as Mark realizes that the only person that's capable of doing this is dead, so at this point, he still is refusing to believe that Angstrom is alive. Again, this episode gave us zero breaks as we get another cool action sequence as we see another cool looking evil Mark fighting against 5 very strong and capable heroes, but he still manages to hold his own until he catches a punch from our prime Invincible. Now cut to all the way to the other side of the world where we find Immortal fighting Mark 7 or No Lenses Mark, who almost gets possessed by the mysterious mummy whose random appearances continue to seem to be some type of inside joke amongst the writers. Now we see Jane and Riley are back as well as they make their escape. Now as far as I can tell, these are not comic book characters, so their story and where it's going is still a mystery. Again, this could be an inside joke or it might have a meaning to the overall story, but so far it just seems extremely random. Now back with Oliver and Spider Mark, Oliver manages to hold his own against him before getting help by the other heroes. Again, I wish we could have saw the fight from them in the sky all the way to the ground, but again, it seems like the purpose of this episode was just to go at this breakneck pace and miss out on all the little details and moments by just enjoying the overall action. Which, speaking of, we get more dope action as we get a quick cuts between seeing Sinister Mark fighting in the alley. Now his story in the comics might be the darkest of the Marks, considering that he killed both of his parents. Now I believe that we actually met this version of Sinister Mark back in season 2 when he killed Angstrom's son. Again, we get these quick cuts of fights across the world, but we're brought back to the main fight where we see Eve and R Mark versus Drifter Mark as Omni Mark, another Mark who murdered their dad, appears and joins in on the fight. Again, I can't say this enough, but I love Eve. She's my favorite character. I love her power skills as we see her helping Invincible, who's getting jumped at this point, by making this huge block, and she slams both the variants into a building. Now R Mark encourages Eve to leave, but she refuses as our Invincible continues this 2v1, but unfortunately Omnimark branches off and snaps Eve's leg and knocks her unconscious.
Now what, Mark? You can't save her and fight us both. Yeah, you're fucked, dude.
Now the Reaniman arrives to help as Donald gets permission from Cecil to join in on the action. Now back with the Guardians, lensless Invincible is having the time of his life as he's battling them. Now we see this evil Mark has laid waste to the rest of the team and rips Shapesmith in half like an android from the Alien movies as Darkwing gets his leg snapped and Kate's gets split in half with ease. Now lensless Invincible is mocking them as he makes fun of Shapeshift's last words.
Help! I don't want to not be living! Wasn't that it? Or no, it was, oh no, I'm going to not be alive! You're a weird dude.
Now Immortal tries his best to keep up, but ultimately he gets his head snapped off yet again. But my absolute favorite moment of this scene is seeing his head being used like a soccer ball as it gets thrown into Kate's duplicate and splits her in half. Now Darkwing still has fight in him as he takes lensless Invincible into the Shadowverse, leaving Black Samsung and Shapesmith and Duplicate as the only survivors. Now during all this, we see Rick saves William from a piece of a building falling on him. We also see Debbie and Paul leave the Grayson house before one of the evil Marks find them. Now if I'm being honest, I thought this was kind of silly that Angstrom didn't send the evil Marks to attack his closest loved ones. You would have thought that Angstrom would have had Debbie, Oliver, and Eve on the top of this list of people that were going to be killed immediately. Now meanwhile, we see our other team in action versus another evil Mark, and I believe we met this Mark last season. I believe their name might be Parallel Mark, who, if you remember, paralyzed Eve on his world back in the season 2 opener. Now Bulletproof tries his best, but he doesn't last long as Rudy tries to get help from Rex to get Amanda to safety. Now this is a big moment here because the show has really been building to this moment for Rex for a while as he does the hero thing and hangs back to assure that the others make it to safety. As we watch, Rex does his best to avoid dying and really using everything he can get his hands on to explode, but unfortunately it barely makes any damage. As parallel, Mark gets his hands on Rex and he tells him, but before Rex meets his demise, he has one more trick up his sleeve as he says,
I've got one thing left.
Mm-hmm. And what's that?
My entire goddamn skeleton, dickhead.
man, R.I.P. to Rex. Before moving on, I'll be honest, it took me a while to actually like Rex based on his personality in season 1 and how he treated others, including Eve. But after season 2 and him fighting and surviving the Lizard Lead fight and watching his arc over that time has completely changed my opinion on the character. You know, I'll be honest, I never really got too emotional after deaths in this show. There's really been no character that I really cared that much for to get me emotional. But look, man, I almost shed a tear with Rex's death in this scene because, again, I really come to like this character, and it was a good heroic moment for him to die in the manner that he did. So again, R.I.P. to Rex. Now, after the death of Rex, we get a moment to finally catch our breath as we see the aftermath of the damage and we see the fallen heroes who have died, as well as some of the evil Marks as well. Now, cut to Mark at the GDA facilities with Eve. Mark refuses to leave Eve's side, even though he knows that his mom and Oliver are still out there. I'm kind of torn on Mark's decision to stay with Eve because they just started dating, and him choosing Eve over the protection of his actual family just felt kind of unearned. It is now day 3, and we see the destruction in the eyes of the remaining evil Marks across the world as Angstrom says that phase 1 is complete, and it is time to meet up for the next phase with the others. Now, in this scene, we find out that not all the variants had the same agenda. One of them mentioned that they wanted to see Debbie and take her back with them to their planet. One of them actually mentions missing William and wanting to see William again. Again, it just shows that they weren't all on the same page. But here we see Mohawk Mark and Sinister Mark and some of the others only want what they were promised, and that's death and destruction, but also they were promised to rule other dimensions. Now, the evil Marks come to a decision that they no longer want to work from Angstrom, which, again, another criticism, I feel like that was kind of rushed and wasn't earned, but they threaten him, but they don't get to him fast enough before he sends them to the wasteland. Now, back with Mark, he is told by Cecil who's behind all this as he portals in to face Angstrom again face to face. Man, I was so proud of Mark during this matchup because he learned from their last fight and he isn't getting caught in one of Angstrom's portals, and he avoids them while defending himself against the drones being thrown at him every which way. Angstrom has millions, if not billions, more drones made as he throws them at Mark all at once as Mark tries to withstand from being thrown into a portal. Now, the threat of losing those he loved was just the motivation Mark needed to punching through the drones and eventually getting his hands on Angstrom. As Mark has Angstrom in his hands and he can end him right now, but again, the whole through line of this season so far is him trying to restrain himself, trying not to kill, so we see him hesitate in this moment as Oliver arrives and he encourages him, as Oliver normally has done this season. He wants that blood, he wants death, right? And it kind of makes sense where we are at this point in the show and how all this destruction has come to be, but he encourages Mark to kill Angstrom, and it appeared that Mark was going to do so, but again, the hesitation allows Angstrom to create a portal and he just makes it out before getting his arm taken off. Now, back with the technicians, Angstrom demands that they fix him immediately, but they refuse and they tell him. Now, for those wondering, the technicians are a group of highly skilled surgeons specializing in medical technology. Now, in the comics, the robot says the technician poisoned themselves and drained countless worlds to exploit to stay alive. Now, back with Mark, he's still by Eve's side, and yet again, we end in the place where we began this episode with Mark having regrets and blaming himself, but we see Cecil steps in and gives him a pep talk about how he's a good guy and how this event was a way to bring the world closer together and they will rebuild for next time, and they're going to be more prepared for next time as well. As Mark tells Cecil that he's going to help with the rebuild for now, but they're still not going to be working together after. As we come to a conclusion to this episode, we see Mark arrives to New York helping Oliver, who's happy to see his big brother, and he gives him a big hug. Now, even though we see the destruction going on in the world, Powerplex does not care because he notices Invincible there and he begins attacking him until Oliver punches him out. We watch as Mark and Oliver pin him down until he's run out of all of his energy, but Powerplex is taken away and he tells everyone that's there and reminds them that
He caused this! Every dead body you find is a person he killed. This is all Invincible's fault!
Now back with Eve, we see Mark inadvertently meets her parents, and we get this callback to Eve's childhood friend that we met in Eve's special as we find out that she recently died. As we find out that Immortal is back, he has his head reattached to his head, and we see Kate's happy to see that he's alive. As he tells Cecil that him and Kate are done being superheroes and they want to retire to start a family. Meanwhile, we see Cecil's going to start the process of rebuilding the Guardians, and he wants Mark to lead them. Now Mark tells Cecil he isn't that guy, he doesn't want to lead the Guardians, but Cecil tells him, you're the only one that stood up to me, like you're fit for this role. But again, Mark declines his offer, but we get this kind of nice moment between the two characters here.
So if you need someone to talk to,
you're the last person I want to talk to right now. Thanks.
As we approach our final scene where we see Mark helping with the cleanup, and he's on the verge of a mental breakdown, and man, when I tell you the perfect timing here, right? As we see Conquest arrives. As Mark tells Conquest, who by the way is voiced by Negan himself in the incredible Jeffrey Dean Morgan, that all he wants to do is hit something as hard as he can, as we watch them flying toward each other with full force. Now for those that aren't aware, Conquest is a goddamn beast. He is a high-ranking Viltrumite veteran warrior and the second most powerful Viltrumite in the Viltrum Empire. Now I really hope that Mark took the time to read his father's books that he discovered from last season, and I hope he puts that information to use because he's going to need it against Conquest. Because look, at the end of the day, Mark cannot hold back like he's been doing in the past. He's going to have to kill Conquest in order to survive. Now overall, again, minus my issues with feeling like some moments could have been expanded upon more, we could have spent more time in some scenes, and I wish we could have saw our Mark versus some other evil Marks like Sinister Mark. But besides that, this was hella entertaining. I love the pacing, I love the action sequences, the brutality of the scenes, and just bringing it back to like a human level, we got an emotional death with Rex. So I think it's safe to say that this is, at least for me, a top 5, if not top 3 episode of the series so far. So looking ahead at the finale next week, which isn't giving us a break, Mark isn't getting a break, and we know this about the finales of Invincible. At least to me, they haven't disappointed, considering that they're always centered around Viltrumites fighting to the death most of the time. So yeah, I'm ready for some crazy, incredible action for next week's finale. So congratulations, you all have made it to the end of my recap and breakdown and review of episode 7 of season 3 of Invincible, an episode that was action-packed for 95% of the episode and sets up a finale that I feel is going to be quite incredible. Now, if you all want to check out my reactions to the highlights of this episode, they're going to be available to watch on my channel now under my Invincible playlist. But now it is your turn to let me know what you all thought about this episode, favorite moments, least favorite moments, pros, cons, favorite fights, and let me know what do you all hope to see in the fight versus Invincible versus Conquest in next week's finale. Let's talk about it all in the comments below. If you all enjoyed my breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, share this video, and consider subscribing and checking out my other videos on the channel. Don't forget, you all are awesome, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.